The cave walls held secrets that made Dr. Han Da-won's hands shake. He moved his flashlight slowly across the ancient paintings, counting each figure for the third time. The strange creatures in the paintings were on their knees, bowing to human figures that stood tall above them. "This can't be right," he whispered to himself. The paintings were at least 15,000 years old, but they showed details that shouldn't have existed in that time. The bowing creatures had what looked like spacesuits and devices in their hands. Day One took more photos and carefully copied the strange symbols painted beside the figures. After 20 years as South Korea's top archaeologist, he had never seen anything like this. The cave, hidden in the mountains near Busan, had been found by accident when a hiking path collapsed after heavy rain. Back in his laboratory at Seoul National University, Dae-won spread the photos across his desk. The morning light through the windows made the images clearer than they had been in the cave. He grabbed his coffee and settled in for a long day of study. His phone buzzed, then buzzed again and again. Annoyed, he picked it up, ready to turn it off. But the messages made him freeze. His colleague Dr. Kim Jin-ah had sent him links to news reports from around the world. The headlines all said the same thing. Strange objects had appeared in the sky. "Have you seen the news?" Jin-ah burst through his office door, her lab coat flying behind her. Her tablet showed live footage of something massive moving across the sky over Tokyo. "They're appearing everywhere." Dae-won looked back at the cave paintings on his desk, then at the shapes on the tablet screen. The similarity made his stomach tight. "Jin-ah," he said slowly, "look at these photos from the cave." She walked over, still holding her tablet. As she looked at the photos, her eyes grew wide. The objects in the sky had the same curved shape as the vessels in the ancient paintings. "There's more," Jin-ah said, her fingers moving quickly across her tablet. "I've been tracking their movements. They're not random." She showed him a map with glowing dots marking the objects' paths. "They're heading toward major archaeological sites around the world." Day One picked up one of the cave photos. The symbols beside the bowing figures suddenly seemed more important than ever. "Jin-ah, can you run these symbols through our database?" She nodded and started scanning the photos. While they waited for the computer to work, more news came in. The objects had stopped moving. They now floated above 7 locations around the world. "Dae-won," Jin-ah called from her computer. "The database found something. These symbols appear in other ancient sites too, always with the same scene. Creatures bowing to humans." The office TV switched to breaking news. A reporter stood in front of a crowd in Egypt, one of the massive ships floating behind her. Her voice shook as she spoke. "The objects have appeared above some of humanity's oldest known sites. Government officials are asking people to stay calm." Day One's phone rang. It was the Ministry of Culture. "Dr. Han," the voice said, "one of the objects is positioning itself above Gyeongju. We need you there immediately." As Dae-won and Jin-ah rushed to their car, he looked at the cave paintings one last time. The ancient scenes of creatures worshipping humans didn't seem so impossible anymore. Whatever was coming, he had a feeling the paintings weren't just art. They were a message about what was about to happen. "The world is about to change," he said as they drove toward Gyeongju. Jin-ah nodded, her eyes on the road ahead. Above them, through gaps in the clouds, they could see the massive shape of the vessel following the same path they were. It moved slowly, peacefully, like it had all the time in the world. Like it had been waiting for this moment for thousands of years. The greatest discovery in human history wasn't in the caves or ruins anymore. It was right above their heads, and it was coming to meet them. The ancient city of Gyeongju had never seen so many people. Crowds pushed against police barriers, their phones held high to record the massive ship that floated above the historic sites. Dr. Han Da-won and Dr. Kim Jin-ah stood with a group of officials near Bulguksa Temple, watching the dark shape block out the sun. "It's exactly like the cave paintings," Dae-won said quietly. The ship's surface looked like smooth metal, but it moved like water in the sunlight. Military helicopters circled at a safe distance. Somewhere behind them, tanks and soldiers waited. But the ship made no threatening moves. It simply hung there, peaceful and silent. Jin-Ah's tablet beeped. "Similar scenes at the other sites," she said, reading quickly. "Egypt, Mexico, India, Greece, Turkey, and Iraq. All the ships are in position above ancient temples or ruins." A voice crackled over the radio in a nearby soldier's hand. "Movement detected. All ships are descending." The air grew heavy. The ship above them moved down slowly, its shadow covering more ground. Wind from its movement made the trees bend. People in the crowd gasped and stepped back, but no one ran. "Look!" someone shouted. A circle of light appeared on the ship's bottom. Something was coming out. The military raised their weapons. Daewon held his breath. A beam of soft blue light touched the ground in front of Bolvik's temple. Figures appeared in the light. They were tall, taller than humans, with long limbs and smooth silver-white skin that seemed to glow. Their faces were gentle, with large eyes that changed color like opals. They wore simple white clothes with strange patterns that moved like living things. The aliens stepped onto Earth's soil. There were 7 of them. Everyone waited for them to speak or move. Instead, to everyone's surprise, all 7 aliens slowly went down on their knees. They bowed their heads to the ground in front of the humans. "Blessed ones," the alien in the middle said in perfect Korean. "At last, we meet the holy ones who walk on sacred ground." Daewon looked at Jin-Ah. Her mouth was open in shock. The military lowered their weapons, confused. "We are the Seekers," the alien continued, head still bowed. "We have searched for you across 1,000 worlds. Our ancestors spoke of your kind, the ones who shaped reality itself." A general stepped forward. "Please stand up. We don't understand. Why are you bowing to us?" The lead seeker raised its head slightly. Its eyes swirled with colors. "You are the descendants of the Shapers. This ground you stand on holds the memory of their power. We have studied the signs they left behind for countless generations." More aliens appeared from the ship, all dropping to their knees as soon as they saw humans. Some were crying, tears that looked like tiny diamonds rolling down their faces. "Your ancestors walked among the stars," another seeker said. "They built wonders that we still cannot understand. Our highest purpose has been to find you again." Reports came in from around the world. The same scene was playing out at every landing site. Aliens kneeling before confused humans, speaking of ancient powers and holy beings. Daewon thought of the cave paintings. "The creatures in the paintings," he said. "They were your people, weren't they? You've been coming here for thousands of years." "Yes," the lead seeker answered. "We never lost faith that we would find you again. We come only to honor you, to learn from you, to serve the children of those who gave birth to civilization itself." Jin-Ah stepped closer to Daewon. "What do we do?" she whispered. Before he could answer, all the seekers spoke together in a musical voice that made the air vibrate. "Please, blessed ones, let us share with you the story of who you truly are." The sun broke through the clouds, making the ship shine like a second sun. On this historic day, humanity faced something they never expected. Not conquerors from the stars, but worshippers who had crossed the galaxy just to kneel at their feet. In the quiet of his university lab, Dr. Han Daewon spread out everything they had learned. The cave paintings that started it all lay next to the Seeker's historical records. Dr. Kim Jin-Ah sat across from him, comparing the 2 sets of documents on her computer. "Look at this," Jin-Ah said, turning her screen. The Seeker's ancient texts showed the same symbols we found in the cave. They've been carrying these records for over 50,000 years. Daewon picked up one of the crystal tablets the Seekers had given them. It was light as paper but stronger than steel. When he touched it, images floated above its surface, showing scenes of humans doing impossible things. "They really believe we were gods," he said softly. "Not gods," came a gentle voice. A seeker named Era stood in the doorway. Like all their kind, she moved with flowing grace. You were the shapers, the ones who could touch the fabric of reality and mold it like clay. Jinnah waved Ara in. Over the past week, they had gotten used to the Seeker's presence, though their constant bowing still felt strange. Ara sat down, her opal eyes shifting colors as she looked at their research. Here, Ara touched the crystal tablet. A new image appeared. Ancient humans standing among stars, building worlds with their bare hands. Our oldest stories tell of how your people taught our ancestors to think, to dream, to build civilization. Day one walked to his wall of cave photographs. But if we were so powerful, what happened? Why don't we remember? Jinnah's computer beeped. She had been running tests comparing human DNA with samples from ancient bones. Her eyes went wide as she read the results. Da 1, she called. The DNA matches. We are the same as the ancients. Whatever they could do, we should still be able to do. Eris stood up, excited. Yes, the power sleeps in your blood. We have always known this. It is why we never stopped searching for you. The lab door opened again. A group of government officials walked in, led by Director Kang from the National Research Foundation. His face was serious. Dr. Han, Dr. Kim, he said, we found something at Gyeongju. He placed a small black box on the table. It was covered in the same symbols from the cave paintings. Day one reached for the box, but Era stepped back quickly. Careful, she said. That is a Shaper artifact. We have found many across the galaxy, but never one that still held power. Jinnah looked closer at the box without touching it. Where exactly was this found? Under Bolduksa Temple, Director Kang answered. Ground scanning equipment the Seekers provided showed it. It's been there for thousands of years. Day one felt drawn to the box. The symbols seemed to move when he looked directly at them. Can you translate these? He asked Ara. The Seeker leaned forward, her eyes changing to deep blue. It says, to our children, when you are ready to remember. The room went quiet. Jinnah typed quickly on her computer, pulling up more DNA results. The changes in our genetic code, they're not random. Something turned off parts of our DNA, like a switch waiting to be flipped back on. All around the world, Director Kang said, we're finding more boxes like this, always near the places where the ships landed, always with the same message. Era's eyes shimmered with emotion. We believed you would awaken one day. That is why we came now. The signs told us it was time. Day one looked at the box, the cave paintings, and the Seekers' records. Everything connected. Their ancestors hadn't lost their power. They had hidden it, buried it deep in human DNA, and scattered the keys across Earth's ancient sites. But why? He asked, though he was starting to understand. Why would they give up such power? Jinnah stood up slowly, realization on her face. Maybe they didn't give it up, she said. Maybe they were protecting it, waiting for us to grow wise enough to use it right. Outside the lab window, the Seeker's ship hung in the sky like a second moon, a reminder that humanity's past and future were now meeting in ways no one could have imagined. Park Tae-sung never thought his history degree would lead him to interviewing aliens. Yet here he was, sitting in a garden at Bulguksa Temple, recording the stories of the Seekers. His digital recorder captured every word as the alien called Ara shared her people's traditions. Our children's first words are about the Shapers, Ara said, her opal eyes changing to soft green in the morning light. We teach them how your ancestors showed us the way to the stars. Tae-sung watched as 3 more Seekers tended to the temple gardens. They treated every plant with gentle care, as if the very soil was precious. Why do you take such care with our plants? He asked. Era's eyes shifted to blue. Everything on this world has been touched by the Shapers. The trees, the stones, even the air, all of it is sacred to us. A group of monks walked past. The Seekers immediately bowed their heads. The monks, now used to this behavior, smiled and bowed back. This had become a common scene across the world. aliens showing deep respect for every human they met. "Tell me about your cities," Tai Sung said, checking his recorder. Era touched a crystal on her wrist. A hologram appeared, showing beautiful towers that seemed to be made of light and air. "Every building faces the direction of Earth," she explained. "Our greatest museums hold items your ancestors left behind. Even the smallest piece of human artwork is treated like a treasure." Tai Sung thought about this. "But you have technology far beyond ours. Your ships can cross galaxies. Why worship beings who seem less advanced?" "Advanced." Era's laugh sounded like music. "Young one, your people shaped reality itself. Our technology copies tiny fragments of what your ancestors could do naturally. Watch." She pulled out a small device. It hummed and created a floating ball of water in the air. "This took us thousands of years to develop. Your ancestors could do this with a thought. They helped us take our first steps into science, showing us what was possible." As if to prove her point, a seeker ship passed overhead, heading to deliver more of their offerings. Advanced technology they insisted on giving to humanity. Not as tools, but as gifts to honor their teachers' children. Tai Sung's phone buzzed. It was a message from Dr. Han Da-won, asking him to come to the lab. "I have to go," he told Era. "But I have one more question. What if we're not what you think we are? What if we can't live up to your expectations?" Era's eyes turned deep purple, a color he had learned meant deep emotion. "You misunderstand," she said softly. "We do not expect you to be like your ancestors. We honor you for who you are. Your potential is yours to discover." At the lab, Tai Sung found Da-won and Jinnah studying new artifacts. The room was filled with alien technology, each piece more amazing than the last. "The Seeker's history matches ours in surprising ways," Da-won said, showing Tai Sung ancient Korean texts. "These stories about mountain gods shaping valleys with their hands, they're not myths. They're memories." Jinnah pointed to her computer screen. "Every culture has similar stories. Gods moving mountains, parting seas, creating life. The Seekers say these are all about the same thing, humans using their true powers." Tai Sung shared his recordings from the garden. As they listened to Era's stories, he noticed something strange. The artifacts in the room seemed to glow faintly when certain words were spoken. "Something's happening," he said, pointing to the glowing objects. Jinnah quickly checked her instruments. "The energy readings are changing. It's like the artifacts are responding to the Seeker's words about our past." Outside, more ships arrived daily, bringing more Seekers eager to share their knowledge and show their respect. The world was changing faster than anyone could have predicted, and humanity found itself facing a future where they were not the students of alien wisdom, but the teachers who had forgotten their own lessons. Dr. Han Da-won stared at the screen in front of him, his hands shaking with excitement. After weeks of research using the Seeker's advanced scanning technology, his team had found something incredible under the ocean near Jeju Island. "Jinnah, are you seeing this?" he called to his colleague. Dr. Kim Jinnah rushed over, her eyes widening at the images. Deep under the waves lay the ruins of a vast city. Its buildings were made of materials that didn't exist on Earth anymore, and strange symbols covered its walls. "It's just like the Seekers described," she whispered. "A city of the Shapers." The lab door opened, and Era floated in. The Seeker had been helping them understand the ancient writings they kept finding. When she saw the screen, her eyes turned bright gold with joy. "The holy city of the seas," she said. "Our texts speak of it. This is where your ancestors taught our people about the stars." Tai Sung, who had been recording everything, spoke up from his corner. "But how did we miss this for so long? A whole city under the ocean." Jinnah pointed to her data. It was hidden. The materials in the buildings bend light and sound around them. Without the Seeker's scanners, we would never have found it. More images appeared on their screens as the underwater drones sent back data. They saw huge rooms filled with strange machines, libraries with crystals that still glowed faintly, and walls covered with writing. "Look at this," Dai One said, zooming in on one wall. "These aren't just decorations. They're instructions." Era moved closer, her eyes changing colors rapidly as she read. "Yes, these are teaching walls. Your ancestors used them to show our people how to build ships, how to heal the sick, how to grow food on dead worlds." Jinnah's computer suddenly beeped loudly. "Da One, the energy readings from that black box we found. They match the energy coming from the underwater city. They're the same technology." The room grew quiet as they all understood what this meant. The boxes found at ancient sites weren't just messages. They were keys to humanity's lost powers. "There's more," Tai Sung said, checking his research notes. "Every old culture tells stories about a great change. A time when humans gave up amazing powers to live simpler lives. We thought they were myths, but they were history," Dai One finished. "Our ancestors didn't lose their powers by accident. They chose to seal them away." Era's eyes turned deep blue with emotion. "The choosing," she said softly. "Our oldest texts speak of it. The day the Shapers decided to walk a different path." Jinnah pulled up more scan data. "These underwater ruins, they're not dead. They're still running, still working after all this time. Whatever power source they use, it's still active." Day One touched the screen, tracing the outline of the ancient city. "Why would they build all this, teach your people so much, and then just stop?" Era floated to a window, looking out at the seeker ships that now filled Earth's skies. Perhaps they saw something in the future, a reason why their powers needed to sleep until the right time. As if answering her words, all the screens in the lab suddenly lit up with the same message. The symbols matched those found in the cave paintings, but now they could read them. "To our children, the power to shape worlds is a great responsibility. We chose to let it sleep until you could grow into it naturally, learning wisdom before strength. When you find this message, know that the time of awakening is near." The underwater city pulsed with soft light, visible even through the ocean's depths. In labs and research centers around the world, the black boxes they had found began to glow in response. Something was starting to wake up, not just in the ancient ruins, but in the blood of every human on Earth. Lead Minji's hands were supposed to be cleaning the ancient artifacts in Dr. Han's lab, not changing their color by accident. But here she was, watching in shock as the metal surface beneath her fingers turned from silver to gold, then back again. "Dr. Han," she called out, her voice shaking. "Something's happening." Day One rushed over to her table, followed by Jinnah and two seekers. They watched as Minji touched another artifact, and this time it began to float above the table. "Impossible," Jinnah whispered, but they all knew that word didn't mean much anymore. Era, the seeker who had become their guide, moved closer. Her eyes shone with bright rainbow colors. "The awakening has begun," she said softly, just as the ancient texts predicted. Minji pulled her hands back, and the artifact settled gently onto the table. "I don't understand. Yesterday I couldn't do this. I was just a normal student." "You're not the only one," Dai One said, checking his phone. "We're getting reports from around the world. People are starting to show abilities." Jinnah's computer screen filled with news headlines. "Woman in Brazil grows forest in minutes." "Child in Egypt builds pyramid of light." "Japanese teen heals entire hospital ward." The seekers in the room bowed deeply to Minji, who still wasn't used to their constant worship. "Please," she said, "I don't even know what I'm doing." "That's why we're here," Era said, rising. "Our people have studied your ancestors' teachings for thousands of years. We can help you understand these powers." More students and researchers rushed into the lab. Some were crying, others looked excited, and a few seemed scared. Each had a story about something strange they could suddenly do. "The ancient DNA is waking up," Jinnah explained, looking at her latest test results. "It's like a door that was locked for thousands of years is finally opening." Outside the lab windows, They could see changes in the world. Trees grew taller, their leaves shining with new colors. The sky seemed deeper blue, and even the air felt different, full of energy and possibility. Minji touched another artifact, this time with purpose. The metal shifted and flowed like water, forming shapes she saw in her mind. It's like remembering something I never knew I forgot, she said. Day one watched as his young student, who just yesterday had been struggling to catalog ancient items, now shaped matter with her bare hands. The boxes we found, he said. They weren't just sending a message. They were waiting for the right moment to wake up our old powers. The Seekers' ships above the city pulsed with light, responding to the energy now flowing from Earth's surface. More aliens arrived every hour, drawn by the changes they had waited so long to see. But not everyone was happy. On the lab's TV, they saw news reports of governments trying to control people with new abilities. Some religious leaders called it the end of the world, while others celebrated it as a miracle. What if we're not ready? Minji asked, looking at her hands. What if this is too much power too quickly? Era touched her shoulder gently. Your ancestors left you more than just power, she said. In every artifact, every ancient site, they left wisdom. They knew you would need both. Jin-Ah's instruments suddenly began beeping wildly. The energy readings from the underwater city were growing stronger. Something bigger is coming, she said, checking the numbers. This is just the beginning. Minji looked out the window at the changed world. Yesterday, she had been worried about her final exams. Today, she could shape reality with a touch. As she watched, more lights appeared in the sky. Hundreds of seeker ships coming to witness what they had waited thousands of years to see. Humanity remembering who they truly were. Choi Yun-ho stood in front of the United Nations building, looking at the crowd gathered for his speech. As a philosophy professor, he had never expected to address world leaders. But these were strange times. We cannot let them worship us, he said into the microphones. We are not gods. We are humans, with all the flaws that come with being human. In the months since powers had started awakening, the world had changed completely. Some people used their abilities to heal the planet, while others tried to gain control over others. The Seekers kept arriving, bowing to every human they met, treating them all like holy beings. Professor Choi is right, another speaker said. She was from Brazil, where newly powered humans had restored the entire Amazon rainforest in weeks. These abilities are a tool, not a sign of divinity. In his lab in Seoul, Dr. Han Da-won watched the UN meeting on TV. Next to him, Era the Seeker looked troubled, her eyes shifting between dark colors. Your people are rejecting our worship, she said softly. Some of our younger ones are beginning to question our oldest beliefs. Jin-Ah looked up from her computer. Can you blame them? Look at what's happening. On her screen, news reports showed the growing problems. Some humans with powers had started calling themselves gods. Others refused to use their abilities at all, scared of the responsibility. Groups of seekers were arguing among themselves about what it all meant. The ancient texts didn't prepare us for this, Eret admitted. We expected to find beings of pure wisdom. Instead, we found. You found real people, Da-won finished. Not gods. Not perfect beings. Just humans trying to understand a power we're not sure we're ready for. At the UN, Yun-ho continued his speech. The Seekers have given us their respect, their knowledge, their technology. But we must give them something in return, the truth. We are not the gods they think we are. We are their equals, fellow travelers in this vast universe. Some Seekers in the crowd looked shocked. Others nodded slowly, as if hearing something they had already started to understand. Minji, who now helped teach others about their awakening powers, stood in the back of Day One's lab. Maybe this is why our ancestors sealed away their powers, she said. They knew that true wisdom means knowing you're not above others. The TV showed scenes from around the world. Humans and Seekers working together to solve problems. Powered humans teaching seekers about their abilities, while seekers shared their ancient knowledge. It wasn't worship anymore, it was partnership. Your ancestors, Era said, her eyes now glowing with a new color they had never seen before. They wanted you to learn wisdom before power. Maybe they wanted us to learn something too. Day One looked at her curiously. What do you mean? For thousands of years, we looked for gods, she said. Instead, we found friends. Maybe that's what your ancestors knew we needed most. Back at the UN, Yunho finished his speech. Let us build a future not of worship, but of mutual respect. Not of gods and followers, but of equals working together. This is the true power our ancestors wanted us to find. The crowd erupted in cheers, humans and seekers together. Above them, the ships that had once come to worship now stayed to work alongside humanity. In his lab, Dodwan looked at the ancient artifacts, the glowing black boxes, and the changed world outside. Everything's different now, he said. Jinnah smiled. Different, but maybe better. We're not the gods they thought we were. We're something more important. We're their partners. As night fell over Seoul, the lights of the city mixed with the gentle glow of seeker ships. The world was changing again, but this time, humans and aliens were facing that change together, learning from each other, growing beyond the old stories of gods and worshippers into something new and wonderful. Dr. Han Da-won stood in the underwater city near Jeju Island, breathing normally despite being deep under the ocean. The ancient technology that protected the city made it feel like walking through air. Next to him, Dr. Kim Jinnah touched the glowing walls, reading the symbols that now made perfect sense to her awakened mind. Da-won, she called out, her voice excited. I found it. The real reason they sealed away their powers. The vast room lit up as she traced the symbols. Images appeared in the water around them, showing their ancestors at the height of their power. They could see humans building worlds, healing stars, and traveling through space with a thought. They were too powerful, Jinnah read. They could do anything, create anything. But they saw a problem with this. Era the Seeker floated nearby, her eyes changing colors as she watched the images. Other seekers and humans stood around the room, all watching the story unfold. Our ancestors, Jinnah continued, feared that having too much power too quickly would stop us from growing naturally, from learning the small lessons that make us wise. The images change, showing the ancient humans making their great choice. They built the underwater cities, created the black boxes, and wrote messages for their children to find one day. They didn't lose their powers, Dai-Won said softly. They locked them away on purpose. They wanted us to evolve naturally, to learn wisdom before we gained such strength. Min-ji, who now helped manage humanity's awakening abilities, stepped forward. And they left the Seekers to watch over us, to remind us of who we were when the time was right. Era's eyes turned a deep, thoughtful blue. We didn't understand at first. We thought we were meant to worship you, but your ancestors wanted us to be your friends, your equals. They knew both our peoples would need each other. The room filled with more images, possible futures that the ancestors had seen. Humans and seekers working together, learning from each other, building a better universe side by side. Professor Choi Yun-ho, who had helped the world understand these changes, spoke up. They gave us time to grow up, he said, to learn how to handle power responsibly. And they gave the seekers time to learn that friendship is better than worship. Outside the underwater city, they could see the ocean life thriving in new ways. Schools of fish swam through gardens that grew in the deep water, fed by the city's ancient power. Above, seeker ships and human vessels worked together to clean the oceans and heal the damage done to Earth. Look at this part, Jinnah said, touching another wall. A final message appeared. To our children and our friends the Seekers, we did not leave to abandon you, but to give you room to grow. The power was never in the abilities we had, but in the wisdom to know how to use them. Now that you have found each other as equals, you are ready for the next step of the journey. The whole city began to pulse with light. In the sky above, the black boxes found at ancient sites lit up all around the world. The sleeping power of the ancestors was fully awakening, but this time, humanity was ready for it. What happens now? Minji asked, looking at the stunning lights around them. Day One smiled. Now we do what our ancestors hoped we would. We work together. Not as gods and worshippers, but as partners, as friends. Era's eyes shimmered with all the colors they had ever seen. Two peoples who learned what they needed to learn. Now we can build the future together. As the ancient city glowed beneath the waves, humans and seekers stood together, no longer separated by worship, but united in friendship. The universe stretched out before them, full of endless possibilities, waiting for them to write the next chapter of their story together.